Hello my friends, Sean Ferrick here for Trek Culture, and today's video is brought to you by Star Trek Fleet Command. Hooray! More on that now in a second. Chief Miles Edward O'Brien, the most important man in the universe and the man who will fix everything, no questions asked, went through a bloody hell of a lot to get that reputation. He first appeared in Encounter at Farpoint as an unnamed redshirt who was operating at the con of the Battle Bridge in the Enterprise D. You know, you'd be forgiven for not really remembering O'Brien in that episode, considering he didn't even, as I say, get a name. And by the time DS9 wraps up, he becomes Professor of Engineering at Starfleet Academy. Like, you know, it's not a bad career progression. And by the time Lower Decks Future comes along, we see that he's the most important man in the galaxy. So, you know, it just keeps on going well here.
Now, to get to there, it wasn't an easy road, because every week on Deep Space Nine, the writers would grab their coffees, they would sit on their couches, they would all smile at each other and say, "Do you know who everyone really loves? Miles O'Brien. Let's punish him for that." And so the trope of O'Brien must suffer was born, and Colin Meaney never got a moment's peace.
I'm Sean Ferrick for Trek Culture, and here are 10 times O'Brien suffered. Hello my friends! Now before we start the video, I just want to take a big moment to say thank you so much to our sponsor, Star Trek Fleet Command. Now, as you know, Star Trek Fleet Command is a free-to-play game that is available on both Android and iOS. You can get your copy through the link in the description of this episode. Now you can play as legacy characters, you can build your own fleets, you can fly off into the demilitarized zone, but careful you don't get too close to any old anomalous readings. Romulan bird of prey. Now I mention that one specifically because Star Trek Fleet Command now incorporates characters and scenes from Star Trek Strange New Worlds. You can play as Pike, you can play as Spock, and really, why wouldn't you? They're just that cool. Star Trek Fleet Command is available via the link in the description of this video. Thank you so much again to Fleet Command for sponsoring this. Yous are awesome, so is Strange New Worlds. Make sure you check it out on Paramount Plus, which is now available in the UK as well. Number 10, Armageddon Game. This second season entry of Star Trek Deep Space Nine shows O'Brien and Bashir helping an alien race to destroy a very, very deadly weapon of mass destruction called the Harvesters. Now, they get caught up in political intrigue and are apparently killed in a horrible accident. Of course, it's season 2, they're not killed. However, O'Brien is infected with this weapon. Over the rest of the course of the episode, we see O'Brien start to deteriorate rapidly, while Bashir has to step up a little bit. It's both a great episode for showing Colin Meaney struggling through the performance where he has to, you know, not only act like he's being physically tortured the whole time, but also try and take charge. But you've also got a great performance that came out of Alexander Siddig, who, you know, Bashir took a few seasons to settle into what he would become. This was great for their friendship. Behind the scenes, it was that they had already seen that O'Brien was one of the most popular characters on the show. Therefore, torturing him would guarantee an emotional reaction from the audience. Well, they were right. Number 9 times Orphan. This episode, unfortunately, it suffers a little bit from where it appears in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It arrives toward the latter half of the 6th season, where the Dominion War was in full swing and, quite frankly, stopping things for an episode to deal with Molly falling through a time portal, it didn't really do anybody any favors. It did, however, continue a trend of not just O'Brien suffering, I mean, he loses his daughter effectively, but it also shows what a good team O'Brien and Keiko are. We also get a tiny little joke to Doctor Who in this episode. The device that is brought down to attempt to help them to reactivate this time device is styled after the console on a TARDIS. Now, O'Brien managed to get one of the early swear words in Star Trek in, because, you know, Colin Meaney just couldn't be silenced. The device breaks down and we just hear, "Ah, bollocks." It's not an awful episode by any means. As I say, purely if you were to watch it without the context of the Dominion War around it, you would enjoy it tremendously. Everyone delivers a great performance, and Molly is an interesting character, and there is a great moral dilemma at the end. It's not a bad one, and you get to see Miles with that terribly furrowed brow he goes through. Good times for all. Number 8, The Assignment. This episode is actually tremendous. Rosalind Chow gets to seriously show off her acting chops here as she returns to the station as a possessed Keiko O'Brien. This is straight up a possession hostage story start to finish, and poor O'Brien has to go the entire episode trying to acquiesce to the wishes of the power wraith while not tipping his hand to anyone else. If he does, that could result in the power wraith killing Keiko. Colm Meaney plays this to perfection. He manages to really get across the stress that he's under while also trying to act like everything's normal. Of course, his only confidant is Rom, so it's a great early example of just how much of a technical genius Rom is as well, because he's the one who figures out, why are we trying to kill the wormhole aliens? The assignment is a fantastic, tense little thriller. It is a great example of the O'Briens as well. Not a team in this one, but as an acting team, certainly. Definitely one not to be missed. Number 7, Tribunal. Yes, the O'Brien is just full-on tortured for a while episode. We see the poor man having his tooth pulled out. I mean, he's put on trial for terrorist acts that he never did, and it's all clearly a show trial. His own lawyer is like, oh, let's lose this as quickly as possible. I've got a lunch to get to. I mean, the poor man is literally brutalized in this episode. And again, Rosalind Chow's bloody brilliant in this episode. Again, it sounds like I'm taking all of Colm Meaney's best episodes and going, hey, everyone else is great in these, and there's a degree of truth in this. So he is consistently excellent all the way through these. And again, you are just so drawn to his character that when you see the other characters around him, it's really, really quite engaging. Of course, the episode ends with, of course, the revelation that yes, he was perfectly fine, but we talk about Setlik 3 again. Now, if you go back to Star Trek The Next Generation and you think of the episode The Wounded, you first hear about the Setlik 3 massacre, which was a dreadful, dreadful mistake, as the Cardassians call it, in which many Federation civilians were killed. This is used against O'Brien in this episode to say that, oh yes, I'm sure you felt a certain way after Setlik, that you wanted to kill as many Cardassians as you could. There is a degree of truth to that. He just doesn't act on it. There is a question of, did O'Brien do it? Now, of course, we know as an audience, no, of course he didn't, but he could have. It's a great one for getting you thinking. And while you are watching this man having 7 shades of tar beaten out of him by the Cardassians, you start to think, is there any part of him that deserves it? Number 6, Extreme Measures. Extreme Measures, a little bit like Time's Orphan, suffers from where it appears. They had to wrap up the Section 31 storyline, which also was to wrap up the storyline of the Founder's disease and Odo's illness. So this had to be done. So what do? They chase Section 31, and you see another great Bashir and O'Brien episode. So how is O'Brien suffering? Well, he's trapped in the mind of a dying man as it's shutting down around him. All he wants to do is get the heck out of there, and his over-enthusiastic friend Bashir just wants to sit there and read this secret and read that secret and read that. It's evocative of a lot of their relationship, to be honest. A lot of it is Bashir rushing forward while O'Brien is behind going, will you please slow down and think about what you're doing here? That's why these two make such a great pairing together. With O'Brien suffering as he does, it takes a little bit of the empathy that the audience would feel toward Bashir away, because he is the one, although accidentally, putting O'Brien in this position. However, the way O'Brien deals with it allows us to feel empathy for Bashir again. Now, this episode actually features a little bit of suffering on Colm Meaney's part. There is a great scene in which case Bashir and O'Brien are sitting in the hall, and that's it. They think that's it. They think they're dying. Bashir turns around and confesses that, while he loves Esri passionately, he likes O'Brien more. And O'Brien is to reply by saying, well, I love my wife. I don't know. And Bashir goes, oh, well, don't you like me a bit more? I love my wife. Colm Meaney had an issue with this. He said they would never, ever, ever allude to the fact that he would do anything other than honor his wife. Now, we're not talking about himself and Bashir running off into the sunset together, but just this idea of the two of them having a stronger relationship than O'Brien and Keiko. He really didn't want to say the lines. Now, there was a lot of back and forth, and eventually, yes, it made it into the episode, but the way it was played shows clearly that O'Brien was sticking by his wife through thick or thin. It's really, really well done in an episode that's fine overall, but it's a great standout scene. Number 5, Empok Nor. Now, Empok Nor, again, we go all the way back to the Cardassian Wars in what happens with O'Brien in this episode. O'Brien and a team of engineers arrive at a sister station to Deep Space Nine that is called Empok Nor. I mean, it's a great way of saving some money because it's just using the same sets and getting all the extras off them. Great, nothing wrong with that. They're there to scavenge parts and see what they can get to help DS9. Now, along the way, poor Garak gets infected with a psychogenic drug that turns him into a serial killer. O'Brien is then forced to watch as the members of his team are killed off one by one as the episode goes on. And there's so much taunting of the traumas of war that this man must have inside himself. The only three to survive the episode are Garak, O'Brien, and Nog, and that was out of a not small team as well. O'Brien is forced to relive some of the horrors of war as he sets about trying to take Garak down. Now, he is not above killing the man, but he's certainly not a friend in the way that Bashir and Garak are friends. There is a small understanding. I mean, it is not Garak's fault at the end of the day, but this is one of the grimmest episodes of Deep Space Nine. It does get alluded to later on, but this is really O'Brien the soldier comes out to play. Number 4, the Storyteller. Season 1 of Deep Space Nine is of course a bit of a mixed bag, although there's some really great episodes in there. The Storyteller is not one of them. Now, alright, I'm not here to dunk on it. I loved it when I was a kid. I loved the Dalrock, I loved the appearance of the village, and I loved kind of how silly the episode is. And that's kind of what the point of this is. O'Brien is basically drafted by the dying Syrah of this Bajoran village to help the rest of the villagers fight off this Dalrock. There is a, I suppose, handlet thing what goes over the palm of the hand that contains a fragment of an orb that helps the villagers, focus all of their energies to push away this Dalrock. There should be another Bajoran taken over. He tried to help, some people got hurt, good times. It's a kind of a fish out of water scenario. It's both funny and serious. They hadn't quite managed the comedy yet. It's basically the first O'Brien and Bashir episode, not as strong as Armageddon Game, but no less important in terms of O'Brien's nearly getting stabbed, O'Brien's having to stand up and do some public speaking that he really doesn't want to do. We get a wonderful scene of Colomini going, "Once upon a time there was a Dalrock." And it's all just good fun, really. It was the earliest indicator of giving these two side quests to go on. It works. It's silly, it's enjoyable, and I thoroughly recommend you rewatch this episode. Number 3, Visionary. Now, there's actually a really interesting thing about this episode in that the Miles Edward O'Brien that we meet in Encounter at Farpoint dies in this episode. No, I'm not joking. He dies. The one that we've been following from Encounter at Farpoint all the way through dies in this episode. His own self from the future takes over. And that is the O'Brien that we follow for the rest of his appearances. Confused yet? I still am a little bit. In this episode, we see O'Brien gets basically triggered by radiation, which the writers behind the scenes said, yeah, we know it wasn't great, but we needed a trigger. That helps him to kind of bounce forward in time a few. Now, in one of these, he sees his own death, and he's, a bit understandably bothered by this. And he also sees the fantastic explosion which destroys Deep Space Nine as a model. Yes, I mean, they built extra models off the original 6-foot resin of Deep Space Nine, and with a series of maybe 10 explosions throughout the model, they blew it up. I mean, it's a bit spectacular. It's also the only time in any of DS9 that you see the station explode. It is a great episode because you see O'Brien's increased confusion and also his literal death. Not to mention, he has to poison himself to make this happen. I mean, he suffers all the way through, all to save as many lives as possible. Now it's, of course, the Romulans being shady that makes everything happen, because why wouldn't it be? You need a shady villain? We've used the Klingons a lot, let's get the Romulans. It is a strong example of a Season 3 episode of Deep Space Nine, where O'Brien is dragged kicking and screaming all the way to the end, sees all of his friends and family die, and still comes out on top. This man needs counselling. Number 2, Whispers. This, in a way, is almost completely the opposite to Visionary, in that we spend 99% of the episode with a character we think is Miles Edward O'Brien. To be fair, the character thinks he's O'Brien as well, because we spend the entire episode following a replicant of O'Brien. Now, there's a very deliberate word choice there because he's called a replicant in the episode because they didn't want to call him an android because that didn't really suit, and they didn't want to call him a clone because, again, that didn't really suit. This replicant has been created to destabilize peace talks. He almost succeeds, except he basically has too much of O'Brien in him. So what we see as an audience is poor O'Brien being frozen out by all of his friends and family, and it's very obvious when Keiko is like, no, we're good. I'm gonna go sleep in the other room because reasons. And you have Commander Sisko freezing him out, you have Bashir forcing him to undergo a physical, and then you also have, perhaps saddest of all, Jake Sisko goes from, it's lovely to see you, to get away from me, Hoss. It's a great little episode. It actually ran short, so that's why they have the framing of O'Brien is doing all this in flashback, or Replicant O'Brien is doing all of this in flashback on his way to the Paradan planet. And then that final discovery of the fact that he's not real and poor Miles is sitting on a biobed there, it's a bit of a shock. Now, Ira Stephen Bear did lament the fact that the episode ends so quickly that it was like, you don't really get to sit with the revelation. But Replicant O'Brien's last words of, tell Keiko I love her, real or not, they managed to hit you right in the comm badge. Number 1, Hard Time. There was, of course, no question as to what the top spot on this list was going to be. In the space of a few minutes, Miles O'Brien lives 20 years in a prison cell, and we see, as an audience, a full examination of what PTSD looks like for a Starfleet character on Star Trek. Now, it's gradually revealed as the episode goes on that he is very much dealing with these, and he's also telling lies, because he says he was alone for 20 years. But of course he wasn't. He was there with the character of Ichar. Now, Hard Time is a script that had actually been kicking around since season 1, and just over and over again it was being passed over for various reasons until eventually we get to season 4 and it gets bought. Ira Stephen Bear says, yeah, right, we'll buy that script. Now, originally the character of Ichar wasn't there, so they added that afterwards to give O'Brien a bit more of, he has to have more reactions, he has to have more, he basically has to have more trauma. Being alone for 20 years is, thankfully I can't imagine, but sharing almost 20 years with someone and then, through a misunderstanding, being responsible for that person's death is utterly crushing. The episode climaxes with O'Brien sitting in a cargo bay with a phaser pointed at his head, and Bashir and the vision of Ichar both talk him down off the ledge. It was about as heavy as Deep Space Nine had gotten up to that point. It was incredible. Colomini absolutely smashes it. If scenes like this justify the reasons why O'Brien must suffer, then I say bring him back and make him suffer some more. That's everything for our list. Do you reckon I missed anything? Let me know in the comments below. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I, of course, have been Sean Ferrick. You can catch me on Twitter and all the socials at Sean Ferrick, and you can catch at Trek Culture for this channel and all of the usuals as well. Whatever you're doing till I see you again, make sure you live long and prosper. Make sure you stay well. Make sure you stay happy. To my friends in Ukraine, stay safe. We send you all of our love. Everyone, have the best week possible. Try not to suffer. Make it so.